Welcome back, riders. In this video, we're going to be going over my winners for the 2023 season. I'm sorry this took so much longer to get out than I wanted. I've actually been super busy so far this year as I've already spent a weekend in Iowa, a weekend in Indiana, 2 weeks in Florida, plus I had my birthday and now we're repainting our entire house. And, on top of all that, I'm still working my full-time job. So there's been a lot going on. So I appreciate your patience. Check out my losers video if you have not already, or if you forgot what happened there since I posted that like 6 weeks ago. Anyways, this will be my last video covering my 2023 season. Similar to my losers video, I do not consider a winner for simply being a good ride. It has to exceed my expectations, or maybe it rides better this year, it surprises me, something like that. This is not limited to just coasters, as I will include an array of other things throughout the list. Some of these are more like a joke. You'll kind of see what I mean. This is my longest video to date, I'm pretty sure, so grab your popcorn and let's jump in. Starting off the list, we have Lucy's Krabby Cabby at California's Great America. This made the cut for two reasons. One, I was able to ride it, which is a win in itself. You technically can't ride this alone as an adult, as you need to ride with a child, but we asked the ride operator nicely and they let us ride. Two, this is legitimately an above average kiddie coaster. It has like this quad down, like, on a small scale, which don't get me wrong, it's not like Lightning Rod, but I thought it was fairly aggressive for a kids coaster. And then there's also some running water and all these rocks and shrubs. It's really nice, and I'm not joking when I say that I like Lucy's Krabby Cabby more than Grizzly. Seriously. Staying at California's Great America, we have Flight Deck. This coaster really surprised me with how much I liked it. I knew it was a short ride going in, and I heard it was pretty intense, but man, it actually was very intense, and I didn't think it was all that short. Not a huge winner, but it's not like I ranked it high in my B&M invert rankings, but I had a lot more fun on this than I thought I would. All right, so this is what I meant when I said I have things other than coasters. But Mrs. Knott's Chicken Dinner Restaurant was a legitimate winner for me this year. Everybody raves about this restaurant, but when I went in 2021, I was actually pretty disappointed. I don't know if it was like, recovering from the pandemic or something like that, but it just was not hitting, and I didn't think it was all that special. But when I went back in March this past year, it was like a redemption visit. It was so much better. It was mouth-watering. Absolutely amazing. The next two are from SeaWorld San Diego, and first we have Manta. This ride blew me away. I had heard good things about this coaster, but man, this ride is just the definition of pure fun, and that size doesn't matter. I kept lapping this, and I never wanted to stop. It's got a solid launch, especially for a mock coaster, and especially with like I don't know, I want to call it a pre-show, I guess a pre-launch sequence. And there's some good forces on here. It's definitely a very good ride. The second from SeaWorld San Diego might come as a surprise, but it's also no longer around. Tidal Twister. Besides being known as a nightmare to get on, nobody really seemed to care for this ride, but I actually thought it had some pretty solid hang time, and I ended up liking it, which is weird, but don't get me wrong, it's not crazy good or anything, but for a ride that nearly nobody had anything positive to say about it, I actually liked it, so that's a winner in my book. Rest in peace. If you watched my Losers of 2023 video, you know I was very disappointed with Space Mountain at Disney World. Riding Space Mountain at Disneyland before I rode the Disney World version is part of the reason why the Disney World version disappointed me. I loved the version at Disneyland, especially the onboard audio. It might be my favorite, just strict, like music on board, it's called a score or whatever. That's probably my favorite I have ridden. It was smooth and had endless great turns. Huge thumbs up for me. It might not have the airtime that Space Mountain has at Disney World, but I haven't really been able to find that airtime, so it doesn't really bother me. 2023 was the first year I got a lot of exposure to trackless dark rides, at least like the newest generation modern ones. Rise of the Resistance, Remy Ratatouille's Adventure, is that what it's called? Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway, all of those are at Disney. I also did Symbolica at Efteling, Volcano at Lost Island, Popcorn Revenge at Wallaby, Belgium. These are all trackless dark rides I rode for the first time in 2023, and I loved them all. This ride model is truly fantastic and has quickly become one of my favorites. Now we go back to my home park and back to some food. I have Yukon Barbecue Pit. I made a huge video about not only Yukon Barbecue Pit, but I also covered the recent history and improvements of food and beverage at Six Flags Great America. So check that out if you have not already for a more in-depth review. But in short, Yukon Barbecue Pit is pretty much an inferior version of most of Cedar Fair's recent additions to their food and beverage departments, like Farmhouse at Cedar Point or Coney Island Barbecue at Kings Island. Even though Yukon Barbecue Pit is inferior to those, it is still far and away the best food I have ever had at any Six Flags park. That easily makes it a winner in my book. From my favorite park, Kings Island, we have the red side of Racer. I'm sure most people know this, but both sides of Racer have been undergoing a multi-year refurbishment. It is my understanding that Red Side was completely finished in 2023, and wow, it was running fantastic this year. I can't believe the perfect blend it has between being smooth while also feeling like a wooden coaster. So, in a way, you can call this a winner for the Gravity Group retrack as a whole, which is true because I also rode Grizzly at King's Dominion this year, and the sections between the new and old track on Grizzly were night and day. But Racer Red gets its own mention because the complete ride is just beautiful now. Kings Island and Gravity Group did a fantastic job with this project, and Don Helbig is smiling somewhere. Now to my second slash honorary home park, Indiana Beach for Lost Coaster of Superstition Mountain. Everybody talks about how this ride is just wild and crazy and weird and different, and they weren't lying. Unfortunately, it has been closed for all of my visits except for one of them, which was in 2023. I was able to get to ride it for my first time. Fortunately, I got a backwards ride with no one sitting next to me. I was flying left and right. Wow, what a weird coaster in the best way possible. I was laughing hysterically the entire time, and I'm dying to get back on it. Next, we have something very specific, the Steel Venom Hold Break at Valley Fair. This is mostly a winner for me because I never got to experience the hold break on vertical velocity at my home park, Six Flags Great America. Finally being able to experience the hold break felt like a triumph. Aside from the personal attachment, this element is actually pretty cool, and it was enough to make Steel Venom my favorite Intimate Impulse coaster. Really wish the other installations could get theirs back up and running. I have been an enthusiast since mid to late 2013, and it took about 10 years for me to finally get my first evac credit, but 2023 was finally the year. It was on Hurricane at Fun Spot Atlanta. I had the ride all to myself, and the train dispatched and engaged with a lift hill, and then it just stopped there. Maintenance was there within 5 minutes, and they didn't really try too hard to get it back up and running. They just unlocked my restraint and had me jump to the ground. It wasn't too far off the ground or anything. Not super eventful, but it counts, and I was finally able to get that evac credit. 2023 was my first year attending Hollywood Nights, and it was an absolute blast. I met so many people, and so many of my friends were there, and it was just a great time. Exclusive ride time on all the coasters was great, as they are all great night rides. And even coming from someone that hardly ever does water parks, I had a great time at Splash and Safari. I liked it so much that I made a huge effort to get tickets for 2024, and I was able to get one, so I hope to see you all there. Coming into 2023, both Busch Gardens Williamsburg and Kings Dominion were the biggest parks I had not been to yet in the States. I knew Busch Gardens Williamsburg was the more well-rounded park, but I was still looking more forward to King's Dominion because of Twisted Timbers and Intimidator 305. But Busch Gardens really exceeded my expectations. It is for sure one of my favorite parks in the States. I loved the theming of all the countries, I loved all the food, I loved all the trees. I was quite surprised and I was pretty impressed with pretty much every coaster there. Well, not Grover, but Invader really shocked me. Bolton was better than I thought it would be. Loch Ness was awesome, had a lot of character. Apollo's Chariot surprised me. I just can't wait to get back to this park. 2023 was finally the year I got good rides on Shivering Timbers. Prior to 2023, I was so underwhelmed with my rides on Shivering Timbers in 2015 and 2022. I really wanted to love this coaster, but I just could not get those rides. 2023, I finally had some good rides. I'm still a little reserved about Shivering Timbers going forward, but if it rides similar or better than my 2023 rides, it will get a big jump in my rankings. Tonnerre de Zeus was a huge winner this past year for a few reasons. My first ever ride on this coaster was in the backwards row, and it was easily one of the best experiences as an enthusiast that I've had. Not knowing the layout beforehand and not really being able to see ahead the entire time, it was freaking awesome. But even beyond that, this is easily the best coaster I have ridden with the Timberliner trains. And honestly, it's the only one with Timberliners that I particularly really enjoy. Kentucky Flyer is a good time. I like that ride a lot, but the ride is like too small to be rough. But the Timberliners just do not track well on rides like Hades 360 at Mount Olympus or Mind Blower Fun Spot America Kissimmee. But Tonnerre de Zeus really tracked well, and it was a great time. This is one of my favorite traditional woodies, especially when not including GCI coasters. I'd have to double check, but this might be my favorite non-GCI wooden coaster. I picked Phantasialand as my favorite park I went to in Europe, but I don't think you understand how close Europa Park was to that number one spot. Europa Park is like a cross between Disney and Busch Gardens Williamsburg. It has the theming and dark rides that rival Disney. Some of them are even better. And it also has the coasters, much like Busch Gardens Williamsburg does, that reflect the themed area country that they're in. I guess that's also Epcot minus the coasters. But, anyways, Europa Park's coaster lineup never gets too much praise because it's not super elite. They don't have that true standout, at least before Voltron. We'll see how that goes this year. But the lineup is extremely solid. Wodan is fantastic. Silver Star is a good hyper. Blue Fire's solid. And the rest of the lineup is pretty high quality and pretty good. But beyond that, this park has amazing infrastructure. It can handle a huge crowd and is very much on a grand scale like a Disney park. So many rides, great food, great operations. This park was a huge winner. Staying at Europa Park for a coaster I knew absolutely nothing about for Eurosat Can Can coaster. I was blown away by this coaster. Great onboard audio, a funky lift hill, it has solid forces, and the ending is so memorable and crazy. This will definitely be one of my guilty pleasure coasters over the next few years. Nobody talks about it, at least that I've heard, and probably next to nobody will praise this coaster, but I will because I had an absolute blast on it. If you ever want a cross between an SNS drop tower, especially like a shot tower or combo, and Tower of Terror at Disney, Mystery Castle is for you. This is another ride I knew pretty much nothing about beforehand, and I am still shocked that this was made by Intamin, but the theming in both the queue and during the ride is fantastic, and it's got this very haunting vibe, and the ride has good forces too. Express Platform 13 at Wallaby Holland has to have the creepiest queue I've ever been in. My group had me walk first as like the sacrificial lamb, and I was seriously on higher alert in this queue than I was during any maze for Halloween Horror Nights at Universal. It is so eerie and dark. This picture is brighter, but trust me, the lights dim and they go out. They did an absolutely fantastic job with this one. Buckle up, it's a thrill ride because Speed of Sound is by far my favorite boomerang. If you know me, you probably know why. It has onboard audio, but even on the scale of onboard audio, Speed of Sound has a really good one. I love how Europe is really into EDM, and it was great to see the parks embrace that, but having a custom EDM score blasting in your ear on Speed of the Sound was the cherry on top. Pair this with the new generation vest restraints to eliminate headbanging, and this makes it my favorite boomerang. I had no idea this had onboard audio beforehand, so I was floored. If any clone has me shocked, it must be doing something extraordinary. Yet another coaster I knew absolutely nothing about beforehand was, I hope I'm saying this right, Valange Hollander at Efteling. Consider me shocked that this was built by Kumbach of all people. I think this is the only Kumbach coaster I've been on. I've been on some of their trains for other coasters, but in terms of like building a ride entirely from Kumbach, it's probably the only one I've been on. Granted, I guess they did have help from Intamin, and that makes sense since they might have ruined Montezuma's revenge? Question mark. Anyways, back to Villange Hollander. When I say anything indoors, that starts with the queue. The indoor portion of this queue was very different, yet detailed, and it had a great vibe. I loved it. The station area was also super well done too. You're kind of like in this castle kind of thing. And then the indoor portion of this coaster is much more like a dark ride than coaster. In fact, I wouldn't say it's coaster indoor at all. But even that portion was done extremely well. It was shocking. The room with all the like fog while you go through the water super slow with the blinking light, that was awesome and so memorable. I loved it. The outdoor portion is kind of whatever, but bonus points for hardly getting me wet because y'all know I hate getting wet. Conda is a fairly well-regarded coaster, but it even exceeded my expectations a bit. It ended up being my favorite roller coaster I have ridden that does not have any launches, and that is not something I expected at all. It was running extremely well the day we were there, so I'm very grateful for that. It has enough theming in the station to get me pumped and in the mood. One of the best drops in the world, one of the best airtime hills in the world, some of the best restraints in the world, etc., etc. What a fantastic coaster. Ending off the European winners is a generality for the trip, and that is the fact that we did not miss many credits when we were there. Now, yes, we did have to cut Toverland from our trip, but that's not the park's fault that we didn't get there. From all the parks we actually made it to, we only missed a total of 3 coasters, and none of them were super significant. The biggest was Pulsar at Wallaby, Belgium, but now that has a clone down in Texas that I'm going to get to this summer, so it'll be like riding the same thing. And, since it was closed, it was an excuse for me not to get wet, so I'll take that. Second was Super Splash at Plumpsland, Japan, which is a relatively small water coaster. Heck, some people don't even consider this, a coaster at all. I would have if I rode this, but alas, I did try to get on this a few times, but the line was super long and the reliability of this ride was awful. I went in the queue twice and it closed down, and then it closed early for the day, and it's hard to drag me away from Ride to Happiness. But another water coaster, an excuse for me not to get wet, so fine by me. Third was, hope I say this right, Alpen Express Enzian at Europa Park, which sadly burned down a little over a week before we visited. But even that coaster is just a Mock Rides powered coaster. We missed 3 credits at the parks we went to in Europe, and none of them were on the scale of like, the Condas or the Terrans of these parks. That is a huge W in my book. All right, time for a fun one. I finally made my ride operations debut. I plan on eventually at some point making a video talking about the whole experience me and McLovin had operating the safari at Saunders County Fair. But in short, we genuinely had a great time. This coaster is super old and rare, and it actually uses a manual brake, you can see me holding here, which was a lot of fun to use, but it was not just operating the coaster, the whole vibe of the fair, plus I unfortunately stepped in cow feces. It was just an unforgettable experience. Driving in the middle of nowhere, Nebraska, to operate a super rare credit, it sounds so dumb. Maybe, or probably because it was, but I would do it again in a heartbeat. Cedar Point Grand Pavilion is actually something I knew about before it was ever announced, and the final product still amazed me. I was thinking I was not going to care for the food in particular that much here, but there were actually some options I liked a lot, and they were pretty good. I love that they offer breakfast on the meal plan, and the breakfast sandwich itself is actually really good. Cedar Point is now one of the few amusement parks I can get cheese curds at now, all thanks to Grand Pavilion. But even beyond that, this is the perfect place to just hang out. I was here for over an hour just warming up and talking to friends during Hollow weekends. And then the balconies with the water view, they're just breathtaking. It's not my favorite food in the park, but it is the best complete package the park has to offer in terms of, you know, food and beverage as a whole. Right next door to Grand Pavilion is their new for 2023 roller coaster, Wild Mouse, and this was actually a pleasant surprise. I thought Wild Mouse was going to be like a once every year type of ride, but honestly, this is something I have on my radar for every visit to the park. Granted, it's not a high priority, it's still not a must do every visit for me, but Wild Mouse is something that I don't want to miss for two visits in a row. I went to Cedar Point 6 days in 2023 and I rode Wild Mouse 7 times. That is how much I like it. In fact, there were two specific rides where I thought the spinning was out of control, and based purely on those two rides, I would rank Wild Mouse over Millennium Force. Granted, I am a pretty big Millennium Force hater, but still, that's impressive. Now, for the average ride experience, taking like all 7 rides into the count, yes, I'm taking Millennium Force over Wild Mouse, but this ride has great sound effects, not onboard audio that I always praise I love, but the sound effects are still really, really cool. And it's got some crazy maneuvers, especially like the spin at the end of the ride. I thought Wild Mouse was pretty good. I promise Tron is the last winner to have onboard audio, but yeah, I am actually like the biggest fan of Tron I know, to be honest. People say it's short, and while I agree it is on the shorter side in terms of Disney coasters, I think in terms of coasters as a whole, it is, perfectly acceptable length. I mean, this is coming from someone that rides Max Force, Joker, and Goliath all the time that are like 20 or 40 seconds, but still, I don't feel like I need to go deep into the Daft Punk soundtrack. It's known as one of the best, movie soundtracks in the world. I love Daft Punk, that kind of like EDM kind of thing. It is pretty self-explanatory how amazing it is. This ride has a good launch, legitimately. Not great, I would say, but it's good. It's better than you think you would find at Disney. Night rides on this are freaking awesome. Actually, in 2024, just a couple weeks ago, I got my first ever night ride with the orange lights, like this picture, so super cool. I, I like the seating arrangement. I don't mind like the bike seat kind of thing. For all the crap people give this ride, I actually really, really like it. At this point, I have gone so many Zen rides that I forget a handful of them, but I will always have memorable ones. And I think my most memorable for 2023 was on It's a Small World. Just me and my friend Matt Warda on a big boat listening to It's a Small World on loop for how long is this ride? 10, 15 minutes? It was a total vibe. This was most certainly one of my coolest experiences in 2023. Me and my friend Steel Venjnik were at Busch Gardens, Tampa Bay, and I forget exactly when the fireworks started, but essentially we rode Scorpion with the fireworks going off without planning for that or like anticipating it. It was so awesome. And then after the ride, we got some great video of the coaster running with the fireworks in the background. Definitely one of the coolest things I have seen or done. Okay, I promise this is the last time I will talk about onboard audio, but I wanted to make an overall winner for music in the parks as a whole, even beyond just onboard audio. I have had a pretty good appreciation for onboard audio and custom soundtracks before 2023. I always liked the music for rides like Mystic Timbers, Millennium Force, Incredible Hulk, to name a few. But in 2023, I got exposed to so many great rides and lands with amazing custom music for my first time. Everyone experienced Tron for the first time this year. Granted, it's not exactly custom music. They just used a lot of the songs from the album from the movie, but wow, it's really good. It really gets you in the mood. Guardians of the Galaxy has 6 different songs it plays, and some of these songs I don't really care for so much, but part of the ride is like, oh, what song are we going to get this time? Oh, I haven't had this song yet. Are we going to get it this time? Oh, no, we didn't. Oh, darn, I guess I'll have to ride it again. That's part of the ride. It's a lot of fun. Like I mentioned, even something as small as station music or sound effects on rides like Conda or Wild Mouse, they go a long way. Space Mountain at Disneyland has to have my vote for my favorite onboard audio score. Eurosat has the music like I mentioned, but Euromir has the catchiest song I have ever heard, maybe even outside of amusement parks. That song is so catchy, and it's the song is better than the ride. I'm not gonna lie. The audio on Speed of Sound turned a copy and paste boomerang into my favorite boomerang. Granted, also the trains, but you get what I mean. And last but not least, Phantasialand as a whole, between Terran and Klugheim, Fly and Rookburg, Mamba, Chiapas, Mystery Castle, Talocan, Winjas. This park is just filled to the brim with certified bops. I will be loud and proud about this. I'm not afraid to admit this. I wouldn't even say Winjas has the best, song out of Phantasialand, but for whatever reason, I listen to it like every other day when I'm working. There's a 10-minute video on YouTube, I'll just put it on and it's just a vibe. To catch you up to speed, I originally said that the B&M Hyper was a loser for me in 2023. I took that statement back after I realized there was a group of winners and a group of losers. My losers were Diamondback Behemoth and Mako. I will say though, I was in Florida like 2 weeks ago, and Mako definitely had redemption rides, so I guess you could take that off. But 2023 is 2023. Anyways, but my winners were Raging Bull at Six Flags Great America, Apollo's Cherry at Busch Gardens Williamsburg, Silver Star at Europa Park, and Goliath at Six Flags Over Georgia. Starting at my home park of Six Flags Great America, we have Raging Bull. They turned down the trim on the first Camelback, and it was running like a dream this past year. It was giving better airtime, and even the end of the ride seemed to carry more speed in the twisted section. It was easily running the best this year out of my entire time as an enthusiast, which has been since like fall 2013. I hope they don't touch that trim brake this upcoming season, unless they're going to turn it down even more, or dare I say, turn it off completely. That's asking for too much, though. Just don't touch it, and I will be ecstatic. I easily rode Raging Bull more this year than any other year. I'm going to be honest, I wanted Apollo's Chariot to be my least favorite B&M Hyper, just so I could live with the fact, at least in my opinion, of course, that my home park does not have the worst B&M Hyper, but Apollo's Chariot was actually very good, and I don't really get the hate that the ride gets. No, it's not even, in the upper half of B&M Hypers, but it is not the worst. Even after Raging Bull, it ran great this past year. I love the setting, and I found it to have a good layout. Granted, some of the layout does show its age, but it makes it more unique in a good way. There's still plenty of air on this ride. Out of the 4 B&M Hyper winners, Silver Star would be my smallest winner. I debated including it or not, but I thought it still deserved at least some kind of shout out. The verify on this ride is shockingly bad, so maybe if I wasn't stapled for each of my rides, I would have, been even higher on this ride. But I give Silver Star a decently big thumbs up. The airtime is great, and it has one of the better second halves and endings of any B&M Hyper. Last but certainly not least is my new favorite B&M Hyper by a wide margin, Goliath at Six Flags Over Georgia. I have an entire video covering Goliath, so watch that if you'd like my, more complete in-depth thoughts. But in short, this is easily the most unique B&M hyper. Combine that with its strong airtime and many moments of positive Gs that generally you can't find on the other B&M hypers, and you have a huge winner in my book. It is my favorite B&M not named Fury 325. Next, we have the Gerstlauer Infinity model as a whole. 2023 was the first year I was able to ride one as I rode both Hang Time at Knott's Berry Farm and Monster at Adventureland. I heard good things about Monster, while Hang Time got some complaints for being short, but otherwise okay to good. I rode Hang Time first, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I was surprised it was smooth, good forces, and I didn't find it short, relatively speaking. Monster really blew me away though. Like I have said before, Monster really carries Adventureland as a whole. This makes me super excited for like Palindrome or any future installations, unless I make it back to Europe, because it seems like this model is really popular over there. On June 29th, 2023, we plan to do Canada's Wonderland for only like 3 to 4 hours before our flight to Europe out of Toronto. Given how extremely crowded Canada's Wonderland gets literally every day, I was expecting to only ride like 2 or 3 things without getting fast lane, but we actually had a surprisingly good time and got a lot done. Don't get me wrong, it was busy, but we were able to rope drop the park and beat the crowds to pretty much everywhere we went. First we did Leviathan, then we got to walk over to their new flat ride Tundra Twister, and there was a very short line by the time we got to Yukon Striker. Then we did back-to-back Behemoth rides that were only like 20-minute waits. And then we ate at Lazy Bear Lodge, which was very nice. The views there are awesome, as you can see in this picture. After that, I did single rider line for Bat since I still needed that credit. That took a decent amount of time, but after that, I squeezed in one last ride on Yukon Striker using their single rider line. So from literally, within 3 to 4 hours, we got 5 rides across the 3 B&Ms, rode the new flat ride, got a good meal, and I got a credit out of it. My visit there that day could not have gone more perfect. All right, it's time for my last two winners, and they are a little more lighthearted. First is the fact that I survived toboggan at Little America. Wow, this coaster is something else. I am 6'2" and I had to slouch and cross my legs so hard to be able to fit. I don't get claustrophobic, but it was just not comfy having my body bent the way it was with a huge cushion bar across my stomach and then the ceiling of the cars against my head. By far the sketchiest vertical lift out there. And that one moment after you spiral down the tower was absolutely horrendous, and I'm just happy to be here today to be able to tell you all about my experience. Last but certainly not least is the fact that I was able to ride Mr. Freeze this year. Would you believe it? Before this year, I had spent 8 days at Six Flags St. Louis and only had 2 rides on Mr. Freeze to my name. I visited the park only once in 2023, but I was able to double my lifetime count, and I rode it twice. In fact, I rode in both the front row and back row. It was actually my first ever front row ride, too. In typical fashion, Mr. Freeze shut down early for the day, so that is why I was not able to ride it more. Trust me, I wanted to and planned to. So overall, I have now been to the park 9 times and I have 4 Mr. Freeze rides. In fact, I've only ridden it twice out of my 9 visits, with each of those visits, riding it twice. I would not consider 4 rides and 9 visits good, but we will take what we can get. Before 2023, I had not ridden Mr. Freeze since October of that awful year that was 2020. So I was just really happy to get on it this past season. And if you watched or recall from my losers video, I only have 3 rides on Boss across my 9 visits. So here is to hopefully some better luck moving forward and hopefully the start of gaining some momentum. So that is all I have for this video. If you are still watching this, I really appreciate it and I hope you found it entertaining. This is my longest video to date. I'm pretty sure, I'm not going to double check, but this took forever to make and I'm all about 35 minutes right now. So again, sorry it came out much later than I wanted, but did any of you have any really good moments in 2023 or any personal winners? Let me know in the comments below. And I hope to see you all next video. Push down, pull up, exit to the right. Hope you enjoyed the video and go have your greatest day yet. Choo choo, bye.